So can the Royals be our October surprise? Is that good enough for you? I don't need a real October surprise with a month to go until the election. That's fine. The Royals winning playoff games is, to me, a great October surprise, punching their ticket to the American League Divisional Series, which they did yesterday with that 2-1 win over the Orioles. And I'm just glad that Mark showed up to work today. He's got his Royals blue on. He's fired up. Oh, my goodness. You're looking good with that fountain hat on, my man.
Thank you. Let's go. I mean, this reminds me of exactly 10 years ago. The Royals were a wild card team. They swept their way all the way to the World Series. And let's do it again. Might as well.
And you got a little baby just like you had 10 years ago, right?
That's right. That's true.
Oh, man. Isley, she doesn't know bad Royals baseball, huh?
She's only seen Chiefs Super Bowl wins and Royals playoff baseball. So that's great.
That's great. Yeah, she'll be one in December, and she's living the high life right now. My goodness. Royals get that 2-1 win over the Orioles. My college roommate is a diehard Orioles fan, so he was all bummed last night. And I said, listen, man, you guys are going to be okay. You got a nice young team. Just try to set it up so you don't meet the Royals in the postseason, because you guys can't beat the Royals in the postseason for whatever reason. Man. So, as you heard there at top of the hour from John in the news, the Royals now go to New York. They'll take on the big, bad New York Yankees.
Yep, you want to be kind to Mike O'Brien today, too. OB's a lifelong Baltimore fan.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
In our production
he goes
department.
to every game when they come to town.
Oh, man, poor guy. Not. Okay, I'm a Mets fan. I had a bad night.
Right, no sympathy, huh?
We blew a 3-2 lead last night, and now we got to play Game 3 today. So, go Royals. Exciting times in Kansas City. You'll have... I guess a game on the road in New York Monday night when the Chiefs are home taking on the Buccaneers for Monday Night Football. So there was some speculation that they could have a game at the K and a game at Arrowhead on the same day. That is not going to happen. That will be Game 2 in New York on Monday. But, of course, you will have the Royals and you will have the Chiefs playing at the same time on Monday night. So that is going to be pretty cool. Now, what's not pretty cool is the attempt at the October surprise that dropped yesterday from Jack Smith, special counsel Jack Smith. And Donald Trump was not happy about this, but a D.C. federal judge made a public withering 160-page filing by special counsel Jack Smith in the 2020 election subversion case against Donald Trump on Wednesday. So they make this 165-page filing public. And what a convenient time. Day after a vice presidential debate, right? When J.D. Vance wipes the floor with Tim Walz. And this is their attempt at an October surprise. What is the point of this? What's the point of dropping a 160-page filing, trying to make it public to talk about the 2020 election? Well, it's really just to highlight one of the Democrats' only talking points to elect Kamala Harris, and that is January 6th. They really have two things, abortion and January 6th. And there's plenty of polling to suggest that it's not working for them. So instead of pivoting and saying, like, maybe we'll pretend we're tough on the border, or maybe we'll pretend like we know what we're talking about when it comes to basic economic policy, they just doubled down. And that's what this news yesterday, to me, is really all about. I have read multiple articles on this. CNN, New York Post, Fox, Wall Street Journal. I've read them across the board. And nobody in the first 5 minutes of reading their articles is able to tell me what the actual bombshell is. What's in here that's supposed to send the undecided voter off the edge? Because I don't think there is anything. What it's really about is just bringing this January 6th story back to the top of the conversation. Now, I've said this for a very long time, since January 7th, which I understand some of you were not here on this show on January 7th of 2021. But January 6th was an utter embarrassment for America, for Donald Trump, for the party. Now, we also know that Donald Trump tried to get 10,000 National Guards to help on January 6th the night before, and Pelosi turned him down. But it doesn't change the fact that the entire day And frankly, Donald Trump's post-elections attitudes and handlings were beyond a disappointment, but an absolute disgrace in large part. You can say what you want. You can have your opinions, but let's be honest. There has not been any there when it comes to how 2020 could have gone differently. Scream all you want about the sketchiness of mail-in ballots, and I agree. I think it's a fair point. But in the end, there was nothing there. So all that, though, to say, Donald Trump is still somebody who tens of millions of Americans, myself included, are about to vote for again. And are about to say, you know what? Things are so bad under this administration. Donald Trump and his policies need to be back in office. And that's the problem that Kamala Harris is facing right now. She can talk January 6th all she wants, but in the end, it doesn't have the impact on the American people, and we see that in the polling that Democrats want it to have. They want to line this day up with Pearl Harbor and September 11th, as gross as that is. And while it was a disturbing moment in recent American history, it doesn't hold a candle to either of those things. It is not even in the lexicon of either of those things. But that's what they're attempting to do. So to me, what they're doing is they are shooting their shot, and they're shooting it way too early. And I should use that phrase and make it clear, no pun intended, based on the recent news cycle. But they are doing everything in their power to try to make it so that all you think about is Orange Man Bad and January 6th. And you don't think about things like, boy, my grocery bill has really skyrocketed. Speaking of rockets, look at what's happening overseas in the Middle East right now. That doesn't look good. Maybe American weakness on the world stage is a bad thing. Wow, I wonder why our allies seem like they're under attack by the worst actors on the planet under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Instead of thinking about those things, instead of walking into the voting booth, whether you're early voting, which I hope everybody does, or you're voting on Election Day, they don't want you to think about those things. They want you to tap into January 6th. And that's why, amazingly, this thing came down yesterday. This 165-page filing was made public in the Jack Smith 2020 election subversion case. But is it going to have a real impact? I know most of you listening are going to say no. But I also know there's plenty of you out there who are going to look at this from maybe a standpoint of being a voter on the fence. Someone who's like, you know what, I don't love Trump, but I'm going to vote for him, but January 6th bothers me, and that's fine too. It should. But it doesn't change the fact that when you look at where the country is right now, people are fed up and they've had enough with the policies in place from the people in charge. And don't take my word for it, by the way. Here is somebody who was on MSNBC last night, who vowed after January 6th he was never going to vote for Trump again. He worked for the administration. Gordon Sondland on MSNBC last night explaining why this is not going to move the needle.
A no for you after that. Why was it important for you to say no more Trump because of his January 6th conduct, and do you stand by that?
No, I don't stand by it, and I'll tell you why. I've now lived 4 years under the Biden-Harris policies, and I have to say that those policies are not only becoming an existential threat to our country's way of life, but to our allies as well.
So when you Ambassador, I'll let you finish, but this is so striking. You said it was a no for me after that, after January 6th.
I did.
And here we are right now.
I did.
And you're saying it's a yes for you.
It is a yes for me. It is an absolute yes for me. That is how badly the Biden-Harris team have prosecuted their job.
But the whole point you seem to be making was that January 6th and that kind of attack on democracy is bigger than any policy.
But I am seeing so many attacks on democracy that eclipse January 6th.
So I want to ask Sarah,
if you want to ask me what those are, I'm happy.
That was Gordon Sondland last night on MSNBC. He was U.S. ambassador to the European Union appointed by Donald Trump. And then him and Donald Trump had a falling out early in 2020 because it was Sondland who testifies as a witness at the impeachment inquiry against Trump. And after refusing to resign, Trump fired him in February of 2020. He vowed to never vote for Trump after January 6th. But as he just laid out on MSNBC last night, this administration has done such a bad job that he's going back to Donald Trump. And I believe there are millions of Americans who are going to come to that same conclusion. In a binary election, and that's what they are with two choices, this is what you get. And the people in charge right now have done such a bad job. They cannot go back to the well of January 6th. They can't. As disgraceful as the day was, they can't go back to it because their job has had a larger impact on the American people's everyday lives. Literally, physically, financially, emotionally. And they're done. So if this is their big October surprise, that tells me they're desperate and they know they've got to try to change the narrative and change it fast. 913-408-7957. Do you think this is going to move the needle at all? And is this really the last of the October surprises? 913-408-7957. Donald Trump did respond to this filing that came down yesterday. Special counsel Jack Smith providing, as CNN writes here, the fullest picture yet of his 2020 election case against Donald Trump. Federal prosecutors laid out their most extensive case to date against former President Trump for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election in a sweeping legal brief that was unsealed Wednesday by a federal judge who is weighing, as CNN writes, the explosive criminal charges against him. CNN has a 15-minute article. You know how now they have like timestamps? It'll tell you how long it'll take you to read the article. I read through multiple articles on this, including CNN's, which was a good 15-minute read. And I'm just like, I'm reading a lot of words, but I'm waiting for the big bombshell. I'm waiting for it. And you guys have not provided it. And that's nothing new. And that's why I'm like, all this is about making people confused and trying to make them emotionally feel attached to January 6th again. That's what this is. That's it. And guess what? Most people who are level-headed can be like, January 6th was really bad and Trump should be embarrassed in part by it, although we know that the tentacles run deep in terms of how it unfolded. Him wanting National Guard, Pelosi saying no, yada, yada, yada. We know all that. We've litigated all that. But then also say, okay, I've got two options for president. One person was not even voted for in the primary, was installed as a candidate, and has done a horrible job as the vice president for the worst president of my lifetime, and certainly at the very least since Jimmy Carter. People are going to be able to square that. Dennis in Bonner Springs, first up on KCMO. Dennis, what's happening?
Good morning, sir. Thank you for taking my call. To answer your question, then I want to say something. Those people on the other side are so brainwashed. Yes, they won't change their mind on Trump because of stupid stuff like this. They buy it. They believe it. They believe it with their heart and soul. The main reason I called was on the election that we couldn't talk about.
Well, who couldn't talk about it, Dennis?
32 cases heard. 24 of those cases have been won by the Trump side on merit, which means, yes, factually and by law, well, what they sued for, they were right. That was election interference. Now, Mr. Smith has been found that constitutionally he can't be a special counsel. Why do they keep pushing him out there?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, buddy, hey, you're doing a good job. Hey, have a good day.
Thank you, Dennis. Your last point's the best. I mean, listen, Dennis made some fine points. Your last one's the best one, of course, about Jack Smith. But here's the thing. If you're explaining in this case, you're losing. If you're explaining, you're losing. There is absolutely no point in getting into the weeds on this. There isn't. It won't benefit Trump. It won't benefit J.D. Vance. If you are a Donald Trump supporter, it doesn't benefit your side. It just doesn't. Because most Americans just don't care. That's what the polling shows. The average American citizen is not getting into the weeds like many on the right and many on the left want to on this specific issue. They're just like, I want to be left alone. I don't want to really think all day, every day about my president, right? I don't. I don't want to see my president embarrassing himself on the world stage like Joe Biden has done. On the other side, I don't want to see my president tweeting nonsense all night, every night at 2, 3 in the morning. Now, listen, I'd take some mean tweets for some lower grocery prices, and I think most people would as well. So, I get it, and basically that's Donald Trump's argument. Donald Trump's best argument remains lay low. Things are a mess right now, and I don't just mean the economy's soft. They might pull off a soft landing, but still, it is very soft right now. Labor market's tightened up in a big way. But look at what you've got going on. Just look at the last week or so, right? You've got ports that are now closed a couple of days, which could have a major impact on inflation moving forward. You've got Israel getting attacked by Iran here in the last 48 hours. You have hundreds of Americans missing in a natural disaster in the Southeast. ICE says there's hundreds of thousands of criminals in our midst, potentially awaiting deportation. FEMA, and we'll get to this coming up, FEMA says they're out of money while spending $600 million on illegal immigrants. Things are not in a good place with 33 days to go until November 5. And that's all that Donald Trump and anybody who wants to see him get elected needs to be talking about. That's it.
Can sum this up with the TV show Alf. You point out a major flaw in someone's belief system, and they take it personally. That's why we all struggle with, why can't they just understand? Because they'd have to admit something first.
Well, that's a good point.
Move on.
Yeah, that's a good point there, John.
That's the toughest part.
That is the toughest part. You're right. You nailed it. And that's where we find ourselves, right? Trump just needs to stay in hiding for the most part. Do his rallies, get out there to the swing states, do his thing. But no 60 Minutes, no debates, none of that. It's why they quickly try to turn the page after that VP debate 2 nights ago where J.D. Vance just cleaned the clock of Tim Walz. 913-408-7957 as we roll till the bottom of the hour. Of course, the news is 1 minute away. We'll get back to much more with you here in just a moment on KCMO Talk Radio. 6:35 on a rockin' Thursday morning. Royals are off to the ALDS after their win over the Baltimore Orioles yesterday. A 2-game sweep in the wild card round. Now on to New York to take on the Yankees. And in the meantime, we've got 33 days to go until the 2024 election. And while the media won't turn it into this, the media won't talk about it like this, the reality is this Hurricane Helene could end up being a bigger threat when it comes to the political landscape than Katrina was for George W. Bush. Of course, Katrina back in 2005 was during George W. Bush's second term, so he was a lame duck. But for many people looking back on that period of time, that was kind of the beginning of the end of George W. Bush's second term. He became a lame duck, and that kind of sank whatever effectiveness was left in his presidency, which is always more difficult during your second term. When you are a lame duck, you really have in each term maybe 18 months to get stuff done, and then it's kind of over. But that sunk George W. Bush. Well, this has continued to get worse in the Southeast. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people still missing from some of these communities across Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. And now FEMA is out there saying that they don't have any money. FEMA is not able to help people because they're out of money. That's according to Alejandro Mayorkas. He said yesterday to reporters, quote, "We are meeting the immediate needs with the money that we have." He added, quote, "We are expecting another hurricane hitting. We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the hurricane season." Joe Biden said this week that he might need to summon lawmakers back to Washington to approve extra funding for disaster relief, after a stopgap bill for funding the government that passed last week did not provide the agency enough money to deal with multiple disasters. Okay, well, you might sit there and say to yourself, well, yeah, they should fund FEMA, right? We should be able to help American citizens who are dealing with catastrophes. Well, did you know this? And I'm looking at this on FEMA's website. FEMA.gov is where I'm looking at this right now. For fiscal year 2024, U.S. Department of Homeland Security will provide $640.9 million of available funds to enable non-federal entities to offset allowable costs incurred for services associated with non-citizen migrant arrivals in their communities. $641 million for services associated with non-citizen migrant arrivals in their communities. It's over $500 million. As FEMA sits there today and cries poor, with hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans missing, we have FEMA, who has been budgeted $640 million for services involving non-citizens. And they want to sit there and cry about how they don't have enough money. How insulting is that to the American taxpayer and the American citizen? The one time that these people might need something from their government, the one time that they might need their government to step up on their behalf due to an uncontrollable tragedy from Mother Nature, FEMA is like, I don't know if we have the money to do it. I don't know. Times are tight, you know? It's like you driving around a Porsche trying to make your car payment and then telling your wife, hey, I don't know about groceries here this last week of the month. I just don't know if we can make it work. What do you mean we can't feed the kids? You're driving around a Porsche, you dope.
Would my recollection be correct? This is a thing where the president always takes the heat, whether it's Bush or Trump, and right now, obviously, Biden or Harris. But isn't this a congressional thing? Shouldn't we really be looking at them for their inactivity or not having, quote unquote, enough money, or how the money is spent?
I would say there's two angles there, John. It's a great question.
Okay.
First, yes, Congress obviously controls the purse strings. They're the ones who set the budgets. Absolutely, Congress is to blame. But to your first point, I'm not the one who made the rules that said the president has to go to these disaster zones and shake hands and hug people and help out and, act like that leader when something like this happens. And Joe Biden hasn't done it. And Kamala Harris finally showed up in the Southeast yesterday and did a little press conference and, then was jet setting off to another fundraiser, like over the weekend. She was not down there in the Southeast. She wasn't down there trying to help the folks in Georgia and the Carolinas. She was raising money in California to try to win the presidential election. That's what she was doing. So, yeah, I mean, is it always a little bit overstated for a president to, show up to a disaster zone just for a photo op? Yes, but I do think it matters. I do. And the media is the one who has started this game, right, of saying our leaders must show up in these situations. Our leaders must be the ones who are showing face in these situations. That's what they crushed Bush for all those 20 years ago now, flying over with his plane. George Bush doesn't care about black people. He's flying over New Orleans in a plane. He's out of touch. They set the rules, not me.
Yeah, I feel like if you're outraged as an American, we want to focus on the right thing. The president's the focal point, but let's direct our energy and anger at the people who are not doing the job.
Absolutely. And there are two people in charge right now. Yep. One of them wants to continue on for another 4 or maybe 8 years as your president. And I'm sitting here right now looking at pictures of Burnsville, North Carolina. I mean, it's a war zone. Right now, there are 190 people who are confirmed dead, but hundreds are still missing in North Carolina and Tennessee, in particular, two of the areas that have been hit the hardest. So this is not something that is going to go, or it shouldn't go away. I've actually been glad to see the media continue to stay on it. If you look at most of the more mainstream media outlets, they've all got this as one of their top stories on their homepages, on their networks, and that's good. Now, they're not going to maybe politicize it like they would if somebody was in office who had an R next to his or her name, but at least they're covering it. At least they're staying on it because they need to, because this is a catastrophe, what you've seen happen in these communities. I mean, I noted the other day, and I told you guys, got a good friend who is down in Augusta, Georgia, and they're going to be out of power for a couple of weeks. I mean, this thing just came in and hit harder than anybody anticipated. Usually when you're in those locations for hurricanes, you're like, yeah, we'll get some rain. This thing comes on shore. It calms down, doesn't become as big of a storm. It blows through in a day. We get some rain. We move on. That's not what this is. That's not what this has turned into. And Joe Biden spent his weekend on the beach while Kamala Harris spent her weekend at a fundraiser. And now here we are on Thursday morning, and we can finally say they're starting to get around to it. While FEMA cries poor after spending $600 million in fiscal year 2024 on non-citizen services. What a slap in the face to the American people. 913-408-7957. That's our text line and our studio line on KCMO. Pete, don't forget about the lack of help in Hawaii. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep.
I forgot about how poorly that was handled as well. Pete, do the states have any money to help themselves in a disaster? Yeah, and you're seeing that, by the way. Ron DeSantis has acted as the de facto president of the Southeast, working with Brian Kemp and the other governors down there to really try to make sure that they're doing everything in their power. But here's the thing. To me, the whole point of having a federal government is for, in large part, tragedies and situations like this. Obviously, it's for your own safety as well and sovereignty and fighting against other nations. But this is really in part where your federal government can have an impact on everyday lives. And that is at times of natural disaster tragedies. And they have, at least thus far, completely dropped the ball. And it's just an absolutely horrible look from the standpoint of the federal government and the people in charge of the federal government. Let's not forget that here. Unbelievable. Text line 913-408-7957. Chris is in Independence before we hit the break. Go ahead, Chris. You're on KCMO.
Hey, thanks, Pete. I just think you kind of missed a point a few minutes ago when you're talking about the press hasn't politicized it. They're just covering the hurricane. Well, I remember just back to the vice presidential debate the other day, they've already made this a climate change thing. This hurricane wouldn't have been so bad if it weren't for climate change.
You know what, Chris? Excellent point. If we just passed the Green New Deal on steroids, this wouldn't have happened, right? Nailed it, man. Thank you. That's right. We can control God and Mother Nature if we just give the government more power and build some more wind turbines and use solar panels. Silly me. Great point, Chris. Unbelievable. Quentin Lucas is going to be here at 7:30 on KCMO Talk Radio. Who is this guy who is driving this strike for the dock workers? Who's the head of this union? What is he all about? I've got some details on this guy you don't want to miss as this strike continues and could have a major impact on the U.S. economy. Coming up next on KCMO. Harold Daggett is the longshoreman union leader. He made $1 million, $1,049,416 in 2023. His sons are also employed by the union. They reportedly make over $600,000 a year each. They are the ones who are leading this longshoreman strike that is now into day 3. Harold Daggett stood in front of the closed gates at the Port of New York and New Jersey just after midnight on Tuesday and delivered a battle cry to hundreds of members of his union that represent port workers from Maine to Texas. And Daggett shouted to cheers from the crowd as the Wall Street Journal writes here, "We're going to show these greedy bastards you can't survive without us." in a speech filled with profanities and warnings about the threats automation poses to workers. By now, you know that the International Longshoremen's Association is on strike, and this guy, Harold Daggett, is leading the union in his fourth term as president. And this is the most militant stance yet. Now, you look at this and you say to yourself, okay, who is this guy? Well, he's pushing 80 years old. He owns a 76-foot yacht, a Bentley. I mentioned he made $1 million last year. He was also acquitted on RICO charges after the main witness against him, mobster Lawrence Rickey, was found decomposing in a car trunk in New Jersey. This is not an episode of The Sopranos. This is real life. And this is the guy who says he doesn't give a bleep, to use his words, about crippling the American economy. Now, some people have taken the stance and they've said, you know, this is why we've got to manufacture more things here in America. And I agree. And we've talked about that on this show. But right now, when the American people are hurting as is, and they've suffered through the last 4 years of price increases, what this union thug is doing is holding the American consumer hostage with 30 some odd days to go before the election. And he's doing it during a negotiation stall where he's basically saying, we want no automation of our jobs. Those on the other side of this negotiation are saying, hey, we're willing to give you a 50% pay raise over 5 years. The union wants a 65% pay increase over 5 years. They've also said, hey, you know what? We'll keep the deal we currently have in place when it comes to limiting automation. The union is now saying, nope, we don't want to continue that deal. We want no automation. That's not realistic. That's not practical. And that is certainly not something that should be celebrated by any American, especially not Republicans right now. Now, I don't know if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can afford for this thing to go on much longer, because already what you're seeing is ships backing up in some of these ports like New Jersey and New York, and you're seeing it right now in real time. You can see the photos. They're on the news. And obviously, these are everyday goods and services that come from all over the world. And if you want to talk about whether or not globalism is a good thing, fine. That's a totally separate conversation. Right now, the question is, what is it going to take to get the union back to work? And to me, I don't believe they're going to get a lot of sympathy from everyday Americans when they say we demand a 65% pay raise over the next 5 years. And, oh, by the way, zero automation. We want to go back on the deal that was currently in place for zero automation. That's not realistic. That's how Detroit destroyed itself. Because car manufacturers said, you know what, fine, we'll go down the right to work states. We may even have to leave the country. If you overplay your hand, guess what? The free market's going to respond. And that's what they're at risk of doing here. But, you know, these union leaders, they like to play the tough guy. They like to make it about themselves. They like to make it about their own egos. And then they use their members. And that's what happens here. They use and abuse their members for their own personal political gain, power, whatever it is they're searching for. That's what they're doing in large part. And I believe that's what happens here. I would not trust this guy, Harold Daggett, as far as I could throw him. Charged with racketeering 20 years ago, he took the witness stand, portrayed himself as a mob target, despite evidence against him from a turncoat mafia enforcer saying he was under the mob's control. This according to the New York Times. During that trial, one of Mr. Daggett's co-defendants, a renowned mobster named Lawrence Rickey, disappeared. His decomposing body was found in the trunk of a car outside a New Jersey diner several weeks later, with the killing still unsolved. It is like something out of Goodfellas. That's what this is. It's something out of Goodfellas. And that's who the guy is. And if you want to take that guy at his word, if you want to jump on that guy's side, please be my guest. I'm a hard pass. Jerry's in Crystal Lake. Go ahead, Jerry. You're on KCMO.
Hey, thank you. Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. My comment regarding the longshoreman issue is that there's a lot of sound logic behind not going to automation due to the tremendous weight factor, not only in the equipment involved in unloading a container ship, but also if that was an automated project, there could be a lot of injuries and death just because of a machine making a mistake and letting go of something when it wasn't mounted on what it was supposed to go on.
Well,
that's the end of my comment.
Thank you, Jerry. I mean, that's a fine case to make, certainly. But they've already had a deal in place and an agreement in place where they can automate a small percentage of the business model. They can do a small percentage of it. But just all I'm saying is don't overplay your hand. Real quick, Paul, you got the last word here.
Hey, real quick, ports like Rotterdam and Antwerp have already automated, so that's a fallacy. We're going to be unloading ships with donkey carts, and they're lucky Reagan's not in charge. That's my comment.
Yeah, you're right about that. We know how that went with the air traffic controllers. Thank you very much there, Paul. Appreciate you, buddy. 913-408-7957. 7 o'clock hour, Mayor Lucas will be here at 7:30. Do not miss that as we roll through the morning on KCMO. You just heard at top of the hour from Fox News, U.S. weekly jobless claims rising above expectations slightly, 225,000, above the expectations of 220,000 for the week ending September 28th. 4-week moving average of initial claims fell by 750 to 224,000. So you're seeing that number bump up a little bit. Is that going to play a big role ahead of tomorrow's jobs numbers? Probably not. But once again, you've got a Fed that is trying and praying that it's going to pull off a soft landing here, where you don't have any kind of major recession. But I think what a lot of people are doing right now, and you're seeing this, if you are a small business right now, I think you're probably seeing this as well, where people are keeping their powder dry. They're trying to figure out what's going to happen on November 5, what that means for their business, what that means for the country. There is a lot of obviously negative headlines out there about what's going on around the world. So people are a little skittish, and I completely understand it. Trust me. Put me in that category of being a little skittish right now. But also what you're seeing is an economy that is not as much in favor when it comes to leverage for the worker as it was certainly in the middle of COVID, but even coming out of COVID, where the worker had a lot of leverage. That has deteriorated here over the last year or so, is what I would say. Now, as we continue to touch on and talk about the fallout of the debate on Tuesday night, this was an admission from CNN, a focus group they put on after Tuesday night. J.D. Vance, Kamala Harris, let's roll it.
In a post-debate focus group, an overwhelming majority said they thought that Vance won last night. Here's why.
He's very battle-tested, very ready, and you can just see that he went to Yale, and he's very intelligent, and he reassured a lot of people, I think.
Somebody else.
It was in strong control of the facts. He ran the show.
He remained steady during the whole performance, and I was very impressed with him being very sincere and authentic.
He humanized himself and actually looked like a regular guy.
Well, I find those answers interesting from the CNN focus group. He humanized himself and came off like a regular guy. See, if you don't consume the mainstream media hacks, you would have already thought that J.D. Vance came off like a regular guy. If you read Taylor Swift Instagram posts, then you don't think he's a regular guy. You think he's just somebody who mocks childless cat ladies or something like that because you saw a clip from 4 years ago on Tucker Carlson's show. But if you actually just watch him, and he's done more interviews than Trump, Harris, and Walz combined the last 2 months, then you'd realize he's a pretty regular dude. 3 kids, 7 and under, married, obviously, pretty simple family life, it would seem to me, a very successful private career after an incredibly difficult upbringing. Like, that's what you would see if you just watched J.D. Vance. But that's why this vice presidential debate mattered. And that's why, while the ratings were not as big as they were 4 years ago, you had 43 million people tune in. The numbers 4 years ago for the Harris-Pence debate was 57 million. That still can move the needle. In a razor-thin election, that still absolutely can move the needle when 40 million people are tuned in. There is nothing that 40 million people are going to watch in this country together until probably a Chiefs-Bills AFC championship game. You heard it here first. Woo! No one else gets those kinds of numbers. The World Series does a fourth of that if it's lucky. Maybe you get 15 million viewers for a World Series game. Frankly, it's kind of sad. That's what you'll get for a World Series game. I've seen the numbers as low as 10 million for some of these recent World Series games in recent years. A Super Bowl, of course, is going to get 100 million. More than that, 110. AFC Championship, I think last year that Bills-Chiefs game did about 50 million. That wasn't a championship game. That was, the divisional round? So that one did about 50 million. You had Josh Allen. You had Mahomes in Buffalo. Jason Kelsey's ripping his shirt off being a wacko. Taylor Swift's in the box. That one peaked at about 50 million. So nothing until the NFL playoffs is going to do a number like the 43 million did 2 nights ago. So the media can downplay it all they want. They can say, well, Tim held his own. It doesn't matter. JD still's the Antichrist. I'm telling you right now, when you have CNN focus groups showing that JD Vance won this thing, and it wasn't close. They had 14 members in their focus group. 12 people said JD Vance won it. And he won it because he humanized himself. He had command of the issues. And frankly, that's kind of where we're at right now in this election, where J.D. Vance's job was to soften the edges around Donald Trump and the entire ticket and the entire party. Because where are they losing? They're losing with women. They're winning with men. Their appeal the other night was to try to close the gap with female voters. And I believe J.D. Vance put on a master class on how to do that. And all you need are the right ones to watch where they say, you know what, I may not like these guys. They may not be my perfect cup of tea. But do I think they can do the best job? Think about you. If you're a business owner or you're in corporate America, whatever you do, have you ever hired somebody that if you had 2 candidates at the very end, you hired the person who maybe you didn't like the most, but you thought was best suited to do the job and succeed at the job? I'm sure you've done it. I've done it. I've hired candidates where I'm like, I admit I like the other guy more or the other gal more. I think I would enjoy spending time with them more, but I just don't think they're up for the job. I don't think they can do it. So I'm going to hire this other candidate. That's basically how you can look at this election, right? You can look at Donald Trump and be like, gosh, this guy, come on. Can't get out of his own way. He can be a narcissist. But you know what? I'm starting to wonder if his narcissism, which he absolutely has, is actually beneficial, where some people will say he's a narcissist, which means he won't allow himself to fail on behalf of the American people. And I don't expect Donald Trump to make that case for himself. He's not going to be like, yeah, sure, I'm such a narcissist, I won't let myself fail. But I do think as just like an everyday American and an everyday Kansas Cityan, you can look at this and actually make that case and be like, this guy did the job, he did it really effectively, and he cares so much about looking good to himself and the American people, and by the way, to the world and to history, that he won't let himself fail in this job. It's a case that, as we sit here with 33 days to go, is to me fairly compelling as I was thinking about it driving to the office this morning. Eli's in Kansas City. Eli, you're on KCMO. What's happening?
Hey, Pete, you're talking about the vice presidential debate and possibly Trump sitting down for an interview with CNN. I don't know if you saw the minute-long supercut they did of Tim Walz's response to the Tiananmen Square question, but it played like a campaign ad. They cut out all the stutters, the stammers, the non-answers. They cut out the moderators pushing back, saying you didn't answer the question, answer it. If for no other reason than CNN is already putting out supercut propaganda of the vice presidential debate to prop up Tim Walz when he had a terrible answer for that Tiananmen Square question.
It was
and here
awful.
in their 1 minute supercut, it looks straight up like if I were Walz's campaign people, it's what I would have put together for him, because it looked like his answer was straightforward, coherent, just a normal guy who is being misunderstood, and it was disgusting.
He's just a knucklehead, right? He's just a little bit of a knucklehead.
He's just a knucklehead.
That's all.
I don't know if you've seen it, but it was. I mean, it was the biggest piece of propaganda I've seen CNN put out in a while, and that says something.
Yeah, that does. Thank you, Eli. I did not see that. I'm chuckling, too, because the Babylon Bee had this piece they dropped last night, the satirical website, and the headline read, Tim Walz clarifies he meant the Tiananmen Square Chinese buffet in Omaha, Nebraska.
He's got receipts.
Yeah, right here, VP candidate Tim Walz explained he misspoke when previously claiming he was present at the Tiananmen Square massacre in China, clarifying he was actually at the Tiananmen Square Chinese buffet in Omaha. Look, I'm a knucklehead, Walz clarified on the debate stage. What I actually meant was that I was enjoying a succulent Chinese meal with my family at the Tiananmen Square Chinese buffet. The food is literally to die for. Ooh. The admitted knucklehead went on to explain he learned a lot about the Chinese people from their food, even going so far as to say he feels great kinship with the victims of the Tiananmen Square massacre. I know exactly how they feel, Walz said. I imagine what it must have felt like if they closed down the buffet. And, well, I'd stand in front of a tank for that. Wow. Oh, the Babylon Bee. Holy cow. J.D. Vance tried to vainly argue that Walz knew exactly what he was doing, that no normal person would suggest and compare a Chinese dinner with the slaughter of protesters. However, he was forced by Walz to admit he had never been to the Tiananmen Square Chinese buffet. So how would you know what it's like to live in Nebraska and eat Chinese food, Walz said, turning the tables on him and totally winning the debate. At publishing time, Tim Walz released a statement clarifying that he had misspoken and there was no such place as the Tiananmen Square Chinese buffet. It was a Denny's, he wrote. Oh, brother. Oh, my goodness. Babylon Bee, never going to disappoint. But it does feel like that's what we're living in when it comes to Tim Walz. This guy, I mean, what has he not lied about? Holy cow. 8:22. So Rashee Rice's mother is finding herself in a difficult spot right now. TMZ sharing this video late yesterday. Rashee Rice's mom, of course, Chiefs wide receiver, is accused of swiping a neighbor's package from the apartment complex. So, man, and this happened on Sunday, of course, hours after Rashee Rice went down with that injury to his knee. The neighbor says it was all captured on video. TMZ Sports has obtained ring footage of what one Texas resident claims shows Marsha Carney, Rashee Rice's mother, wearing a custom Mama Rice number 4 jersey, walking by their doorway, looking right into the camera before walking down the hall, and then turning around, looking back into the camera, and then taking a package from outside somebody's apartment complex. Not like outside the complex, like outside the door in the hallway. Like one of those, Amazon deliveries, whatever it might be. You can see the woman in the jersey, then made her way back to the door, slid a package on the ground with her foot, moved it out of the frame, or so she thought, but then turn around, lift a box from her feet, and then walk away. TMZ reports were told the owner had purchased a 2 limited edition. Is it Chapel? What's this new artist from up here? What's her name?
Chapel Roan. She's from Springfield.
Chapel Roan vinyls from Urban Outfitters, and attempted to resolve the issue with Carney. Rice and the apartment complex leasing office in hopes of getting the items back, but unfortunately they had no luck. She's from Springfield, right, Mark? Is that what you said?
Yeah, she's from Springfield. She's blown up this past summer.
She's the one who said recently in some interview with like Vanity Fair that she didn't really care about Trump or Harris. Didn't she say something political and it drove the left nuts because she didn't just like drink the Kamala Harris
all
propaganda?
her friends and family back in Springfield are Republican, basically.
Ah, okay. So. Now she's not, but she's like, I don't have anything against people who vote the other way, basically.
Yeah, basically.
All right, which is like a normal American stance to take.
Yeah.
Which Hollywood and the media can't have. But anyway, her vinyls are at the center of this issue between Rashee Rice and whoever this person is who says Rashee Rice's mother stole these vinyls that were delivered to her apartment. You know, it's one of the things I always say when it comes to how you're raised, who your parents are, and I don't know what exactly happened here, although I'm looking at the footage right now. I'll post it on X at Pete Mundo. You can see it there and make of it what you want, but it seems pretty obvious to me. The greatest privilege you can have in life is having parents who aren't knuckleheads and having parents who care and want to raise you and want to be good role models. I don't know if Rashee Rice has that. I know he's obviously had his troubles. Going back to SMU, we know what happened in the offseason with the Chiefs. But, man, you can't buy decent parents. I don't care how much money you have, how much skill you have, and it's the best thing you can have in life. And this is just another minor example of that, John.
It reminded me of the Homer Simpson fading into the bushes.
Yes.
Meme that's out. When I saw it, I'm like, really?
But at least Homer knows he's going into the bushes. She thinks she's out of the camera shot.
Yeah.
And she's staring right into the camera.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, hey,
whoops.
Yeah. And by the way, your son's doing okay. He can buy you a couple vinyls if you need.
Chapel Roan.
Yeah. Okay. You'll be just fine. Rashee's got some time on his hands now, too. He's just going to the office to get his knee worked on so he can go on his phone, buy you a couple of the vinyls, and everyone will be okay. My goodness. But, you know, when this is how you've been programmed for most of your life, you do stupid stuff like this, allegedly, since I need to throw that word in there time and time again. In the meantime, real quick, speaking of the sports scene and knuckleheads, Colin Kaepernick. There's a story about Colin Kaepernick from yesterday. I know.
Nobody cares.
But I just want to share it with you real quick. Colin Kaepernick is now 36 years old, hasn't played in an NFL game since 2016. I would not have guessed it's been that long, but it has been that long. Well, he has recently said on CBS Mornings that he still has a desire to play football. He said, quote, "It was 15 years of work and dedication before I ever stepped foot on an NFL field. And to have that passion and chase it for that long, you don't just give up on that. You don't just walk away. You chase it, you pursue it." So he maintains, despite being away from football for almost a decade, he is still ready. He said, "There will never be an instance where I'm not ready. There will never be an instance where it's because I don't want to anymore." See, this guy is such a fraud. Such a fraud. If he wanted to play football, he could play in the CFL. He could play in what's that new spring league that they're doing as well that, exists now? It's not the XFL. It's the XFL spinoff. He could do any of that. He doesn't want to play football. He wants to be a martyr. And he wants to be like, I'll still play in the NFL. You just watch. It's like, okay, if you want to prove it, then go own a lower league and show the NFL that they're wrong about you. But he doesn't actually want to do that. We're going to have a story about Colin Kaepernick when he's 58 years old with a big, long white beard, being like, I can still play.
Man, LeBron, put us in.
Yeah. We're going to get those stories. And CBS this morning is going to take it seriously, too. They're going to be like, oh, yeah. No, yeah, absolutely, Colin.
It's been 25 years and NFL owners are still blackballed.
That's exactly how they're going to handle it at the media level. There's no doubt in my mind. It's like, it's been a decade, bro. It's over. Okay? I'm better off trying to play in the NFL than you are. We're the same age. Give me a shot. Give me a chance.
Packers might need a kicker if he can kick.
Yeah. I don't know if I trust him to do anything. I don't want him to be the water boy, to be honest.